Welcome to The Merge. I'm Alan Shhadeh, Professor and Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture at the American University of Beirut. On this podcast, we speak with thinkers and doers whose work crosses disciplinary boundaries and challenges conventional ways of knowing. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Vida Mia García, an ethnographer, designer, and innovation strategist. Dr. Garcia is a professor of practice in the School of Architecture and Design, where she founded the interdisciplinary design practice program. Dr. Garcia holds a doctorate in modern thought and literature from Stanford and came to AUB via the D School at Stanford University. You have a PhD. First of all, you went to Brown University.
I did. That was my
and you
undergraduate.
grew up partly in San Antonio, if I recall. And
Almost
I remember
fully
that
in San
because
Antonio, yeah.
I spent a good amount of time in Texas myself. And you went to Brown, and then you went to Stanford from there. And I imagine at the time, both even when you were at Stanford as a doctoral student in the program you were in, it's a very academic program. Mm-hmm. How did you go from being a PhD in modern thought and literature to a person that's doing design practice and even having your own design practice?
Yeah. About halfway through my PhD trajectory, I had the unsettling revelation that I was deeply unhappy. I was deeply unhappy with what was going on here. I had gone to grad school basically, and my fields were literature and cultural anthropology. So I was driven by my curiosity about story and culture, right? And what I was doing was sort of being required to sit in a room alone for seemingly endless amounts of time, reading, and then writing all alone. I was much more social person than that. I was just, the thing that kept my spirit alive was the teaching, right? So I left. I did manage to finish. I had no idea what I was going to do, none. And I just so happened to have a friend who was starting his own small consumer insights firm. So essentially qualitative research, talking to consumers, to users of various products. And he said, come work for me. And I said, I have no idea what you do, but okay, sure. And he said, you know what? You don't need to know that. You don't need any specialized training. I know you. I see you. You know how to talk to people. You know how to get stories from people. That's what I want you to do. And I was like, okay. And the first day I went out into the field, I was in love. I felt like I'd found it. I was in love with it. So anyway, a couple of years of that. And in the meantime, this was about 2011, 2012. The design school had been, the D school at Stanford had gotten off the ground around 2007. So it had about, 5 years of foundational sort of work under it. And my then partner at the time was involved in the D school, and he was like, hey, you should come check out doing some of this work as well. And the rest is history. That's how I moved into having a practice of my own and doing work in design thinking, which was, again, if anybody had ever told me when I was 22 or something, people will pay you to listen to people's stories, I wouldn't have believed them. It would have been heaven, but I never would have believed them. And I'm really lucky that that's what I get to do.
I have a favorite example. You've given this in a workshop that you've led here for faculty members. It was a case study on an MRI.
That Doug Dietz, who is the head of engineering at GE, he was visiting this children's hospital and witnessing this child be terrified of getting into an MRI. He was sort of on a victory lap tour of hospitals that had installed his MRI machines that had been winning scads of awards, like winning the Oscars of engineering for the technological prowess of his machines. So he could not have been, sort of more on top of the world as an engineer, right? And then he saw the human reaction to his machine, right? And from one moment to the next, being on top of the world, winning all of the awards, and thinking, I have failed. I've actually failed here because I'm seeing a child crying her eyes out. I'm seeing terrified parents. I'm, as he followed up with, asking questions to the X-ray tech, learning about these, like something like over 80% of children do need to get sedated. Yes, I go under anesthesia. So then think about how much more dangerous the procedure becomes. Think about how much more backlog there is. If a parent very justifiably is like, I don't want this to happen, okay, then an appointment's canceled. Think about the money that it costs to all of a sudden have to call in the anesthesiologist down into the MRI room, right? So he realized something needed to change. And what he did, it turns out that he had just attended the executive education program at the D School. So he had just become equipped with this human-centered designed approach to problem solving. And he decided to use it, to do something about it using design thinking. So he started meeting, now who are the customers, right? A conventional way of framing this problem would say the hospitals are my customers. The hospitals are the one writing the check for my MRIs. That's certainly probably who his senior leadership at GE thought were his customers. And he thought, no. My customer is this little girl who's terrified, right? That's who I need to care about. And so he and his team went out and did what we call empathy, right? Empathy work, which is having conversations, really, getting to know somebody, getting to know these kids, getting to know, these chronically ill children, their hopes, their dreams, their disappointments. And I just, as a side note, what I really appreciate about this story is that Doug is, again, an engineer. And so imagine this rigorously technically trained person this leader going back to his team of engineers and telling his team of engineers,
we need to talk to children.
We need to talk to kids. They're not having a good time with this. How do we fix their fear, right? Not we need to overhaul the machine, not to redesign the specs. None of it was a human problem. And he needed to convince them this is the right problem for us to solve. Technical team of engineers. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something really powerful in that sort of set of durable skills of, being able to inspire and persuade, right? Being able to marshal resources behind your maybe seemingly crazy idea. That's what leaders do. It's not just the technical skills, right? So that's what he did.
So what did they do?
They went out, they talked to kids, they got on the ground, they were drawing and with crayons, they were talking to them about their lives, talking to them about their illnesses, talking to them again about their hopes and their disappointments.
And how did that translate into something else? Another
so
approach?
What they learned essentially and is that, these sick kids are going to the hospital all the time. And meanwhile, their brothers and sisters are going to summer camp. They're going and, being in plays at school. They're being kids and having fun. And there was this sense of, I don't get to do that. Look at all the trophies and ribbons in my sister or my brother's rooms. I have the hospital bed in mine. So Doug went to his team and was like, how do we bring a sense of adventure to these kids' lives? How might we make them feel like they're having just as much of adventure as their brothers and sisters get to go on? And how do we do that? So it was actually kind of amazing. They just went to the bus wrap, the vinyl bus wraps that you see often on city buses that are essentially advertisements, right? So they did not redesign an MRI machine, right? That was doing its job very well. That's not where the problem was. They took that sort of vinyl wrap technology and wrapped the MRI machines and turned this into the adventure series, right? And it wasn't just, so the MRI machines became, for example, a big pirate ship. They became a canoe going into a tropical jungle river. It became a spaceship, right? And it wasn't just about that. What they also did was they greatly extended their understanding of this child's experience of their MRI appointment, right? So that it wasn't just that point of contact, the kid walking into a room, seeing this machine and being terrified. Actually, we started like a couple of weeks before. So they made their MRI appointment. And then a couple of weeks before, the child got a package in the mail. That was sort of a little backpack and a note that said, you're going to go on a big adventure. You are going to board a pirate ship. It's really exciting. But if you're really, really, really still and really, really, really careful, you might see a fish jump over you in your bed, right? The fish is just the inner cylinder that's turning, right? And there's a vinyl decal of a fish in that inner cylinder, right? If you're really, really, really quiet and you're really, really, really still, you might see the stars come out. There's just a vinyl decal of stars on the inner cylinder. They fundamentally changed the child's experience of the MRI. They didn't change the MRI, right? As a result of this, something like the sedation rates of children dropped to under like 2%. So imagine the cost savings. Imagine like getting rid of the backlog. Imagine the patient satisfaction, which I mentioned were currency for senior level hospital administrators. Imagine the relief for parents. Imagine the happiness and the joy for kids. Completely changing the experience of an MRI scan, right? Which I'm terrified by, and I'm a full-grown adult, right? So that's, I think, sort of the power of being able to reframe what exactly is the problem that we're solving here. Because if he had stayed in that domain of technical expertise, he might have just said, like, we can't. The machine does what it's supposed to do. It does it well.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it doesn't matter.
So that finding and framing problem, that's kind of been your mission. Initially, when you founded the Interdisciplinary Design Practice Program at MSFEA, it was really to take engineering students and to have them look upstream. And I know this because I went through the engineering curriculum. We would be given well-defined problems, and then you find the solution for that well-defined problem. But what you said with IDPP is, okay, well, let's go upstream. Let's find what is the right problem to solve in the first place. And this is an example of it with the MRI machine. The problem isn't the machine. The problem is the experience that children have when they're going to go to an appointment. We talked a little bit before this podcast about potentially Circle collaborating with the public bus system, the new public bus system in Lebanon. What might be a project just that you could imagine students might be working on in relation to that also involves stories?
So, I mean, I would love to, like, students could go out and in conjunction with, I think it's ACTC as the client, right? So think about, like, why are people, when people take the bus, why are they taking the bus? When they don't take the bus, why are they not taking the bus? It's a really interesting potential area to explore, right? Tell me about the most memorable time when you nearly missed a bus, right? Because that kind of story might elicit like the effort people go through to avail themselves of a resource, even when that effort might be extremely taxing for them, right? What can that reveal about people's use habits, right?
Might these kinds of stories inform the objective of how could we get more people to use buses to get to work every day or to get to school, as opposed to depending on single occupancy cars?
So when people are telling us their stories about why they do or don't use things, why they do or don't do things, right? What we're trying to hear from them is essentially emotion, right? Because emotion is a proxy for their need. What do they need? And we're asking about emotion because we often like to say that people don't necessarily know what they need, but they know how they feel, right? And one of my favorite quotes is like, if it's attributed to Henry Ford, and I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but it's, if we had asked people what they want, they would have said a faster horse, right? So we know maybe they wanted to get somewhere faster. Maybe they wanted to not miss an occasion, or, not seem irresponsible to their employer, whatever. These are human emotional needs that can be expressed. The sort of human-centered designerly magic that can come into it is making sense of the stories that we're hearing and the motivations, the contradictions, everything behind it, to then make an actionable problem statement, right? Without getting too jargony, right? Make an actionable problem statement for the client that we're working with, right? That could open up a whole world of benefits to them, right? So that, and it could cascade into like, how are we going to up ridership, right? How are we going to make this the desirable alternative to single person car usage in Lebanon, right? How are we going to think about, the best way to the routes to optimize, not just, by using sort of whatever might be used. Our civil engineers will know, right? Like the whatever optimization software, but like actually according to the habits of everyday life of Beirutis, right? And not just.
So that practice,
Yeah.
I mean, I can see that it has roots in anthropology or ethnography, but it's certainly not limited to that domain. I mean, it seems like no one owns this space of human-centered design.
Oh,
no one
no.
discipline owns it.
No. Yeah,
And that's kind of what's expansive and exciting about circles encompassing the whole campus, making MSFEA a place that students from all disciplines can find as a home for working on problems that cross disciplinary boundaries, which are essentially all real problems. The only problem that doesn't cross disciplinary boundaries is a textbook problem.
Exactly.
And this is exactly the inverse of what you're doing, I think. And that's why it's so complementary to everything else we teach and learn on campus.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so such a useful approximation of the world outside of AUB, right? Because so often in our acquisition of our disciplinary knowledge, in the acquisition of the engineering degree or the English degree or something, we are by nature siloed in that quest, right? But once we graduate from here, then what? When we're working with people who think so radically differently from us, who are trained so deeply differently, and we have to work together to solve problems, right? And this is a process or a methodology that actually, is completely discipline agnostic, that everybody can use and can use well with practice, right? So that's what keeps drawing me over and over to it, because it's never, it's seemingly inexhaustible. It's utility, but also sort of the continual surprises that you can find in the discovery process of it.
Well, Vida Mia, it's been a delight talking to you today. It's always a delight working with you, and look forward to seeing you back here soon.
Yes. Thank you.